Heyo. So I just wanted to come in and talk about aspects in astrology, more specifically oppositions, and what happens when they involve more relatable or benefic energies. So an aspect in astrology, traditionally, is defined as a line of communication or a way for two planets in the zodiac to see or speak to each other, such that if there's an aspect planet, if there's an aspect present, then there is an intermingling between the two planets in aspect. If there's no aspect present, this is known as aversion and means there is no line of communication or intermingling of those two planetary energies. This is slightly different in modern astrology, where lack of aspects, aversions, are sometimes seen as aspects in the form of semi-sextiles and inconjuncts. And there are also more forms of aspects today in modern astrology. I'm not going to be going over that in this video, so just keep that in mind. A great highlighter of the aspect cycle is the moon in relationship with the sun. So the aspects that the moon and sun form together, that the moon sweeps in to make with the sun. So they start at the new moon where there is complete darkness. They form the first square at the first quarter moon where there is this waxing and this halfway into light, into full bloom. At the full moon, there is an opposition between the sun and the moon, and at the last quarter, there is another square between the sun and the moon, where the moon will then wane or come into conjunction with the sun and fall into complete darkness once again, unless there is an eclipse. So the reason I bring that up is just to highlight how this aspect cycle is innately visible, right? And the relationship between planets seems to say something in how they're responding to each other, right? And the moon, the planet of response, reflection, and relationship, really highlights that, in that it's literally fullest, it's literally at peak, at its height in some way, in terms of light, when it's in opposition with the sun. And opposition typically has to do with forms of relationship, with self-other, in astrology, bringing in dichotomy, right, where two different perspective worlds or people come together and meet in some sort of way. So the reason that the energies involved in aspects really matter is that if there is a more projective energy like the sun, like in a hard aspect with a more receptive energy like the moon, the tension can be alleviated by the fact that the moon is reflecting and not contradicting. It's moving around and responding to whatever the sun is doing. So for example, right now we have Sun in Virgo, and we, during this season, we get full moons in Pisces, right? So the full moon in Pisces is in a completely different energy, right? Pisces and Virgo are totally opposite, right? But the thing that happens with full moons, because the sun is projecting an energy and the moon is receiving one, is that the moon is able to reflect what the sun is signifying, but in a completely opposite way, and bring that to the table. And that's sort of the bridge that then is created, versus if we get a more dry energy, and I'll talk about that coming up. So going in deeper to the Pisces full moon, not necessarily this one because it is colored by more specific planetary energies, but in general, we have the sun in Virgo and we have the moon in Pisces, right? Now, these energies innately contrast because Virgo has to do with things like a sort of defined methodology, where Pisces has to do with like illusions, creativity, and dreams, right? Where there's like this complete contrast, like how do they find a way to work together, right? Well, in the sense of the sun and moon, the sun is like what we're doing, what's going on, right? Where the moon is sort of a deeper emotional reflection of that, sort of dealing with how we're feeling about what's going on, right? How we're connecting about that, what our emotional responses are to that, right? So when we're in the sense of sun in Virgo, what's going on is still something practical, organizational, trying to figure out how to get things in order, right? Where things should go. Yeah, sort of making sure that we have the support we need to move forward, right? It's a very practically an enabling sign, just trying to get us to a place where we can go, right? So the fact that this is being reflected in Pisces doesn't necessarily mean with the moon there that we're completely getting thrown off into this Pisces dream world, right? And it's contradicting all of this practical structure that we're going to do. And now, like I said, this could be the case. This is a more broadly speaking, right? What the full moon in Pisces is doing is it's reflecting that practical energy of Virgo in things like our dreams, in things that are more creative, in these feelings that sort of come and go, right? The open potential ocean of emotion that is Pisces, right? Is sort of reflecting this practical need. And that's sort of important to understand, right? So this seems to be the case in some way or another in the fact of sort of alleviating tension and not bringing something completely contradictory to the table so that it's sort of like tit for tat, right? I move left, something moves right, I can't move forward. Or I move left, they move left, and now we're fucking in a fight, you know? It's sort of not like that in the sense of Saturn sort of able to bring like a wall or a barrier, which we do see present in Pisces right now, or sort of Mars able to bring that direct conflict, right? With the more relatable energies, starting with the moon, moving into Venus, and then Jupiter, and in some way Neptune, although it can be more like a guiding hand in the sense of an opposition into a delusion, which may not be the greatest, but it, depending on how you approach it, it could be a spiritual experience. But the idea being that these more relatable energies tend to alleviate the tension present in the opposition because they're able to sort of reflect or use that opposite force, that opposite energy in a way that's supportive to whatever the planet they're opposing is trying to signify, right? So going deeper into this with, say, Jupiter, right? Like a great one, like a classic one that I really love is Jupiter opposed the moon, right? Where the moon represents comfort and Jupiter represents growth, right? Where this can be, in order to achieve growth, we have to step out of our comfort zone, right? It's sort of like Jupiter is representing something completely different or in a place completely different than what we're used to or what we're comfortable with. But we find when we do step into that place, a lot happens. There's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of potential, there's a lot going on, a lot of enthusiasm, right? And it's really fun, it's enjoyable, but it can kind of be a lot, right? It can kind of be a lot emotionally. And so it kind of represents sort of that classic cycle of like growth, going out there, experiencing the anxiety, all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world, and then receding back into your comfort zone, right? Where it doesn't innately represent something that's tense towards the moon, right? It's sort of like a guiding hand, like, okay, I know you're stepping out of your comfort zone, but we got you, you know? And yeah, and so I love that example. So basically, just to sum up a little bit more, once again, is when we do find an opposition that has a sort of yin and yang dynamic, there can be a bridge created where the more projective and dry energy can be received with the more receptive and relatable energy. And this is just a really cool way where completely opposite energies can find a way to support each other, right? And this aspect, the opposition, doesn't always have to result in conflict or a wall or a barrier. right? So I just thought I'd share. I hope y'all enjoy. Hey, beach!